The Friday mailbag is back, and it covers a bunch of great topics, including which prospects Notre Dame absolutely has to land in the class of 2025. That's coming right up in today's edition of Locked On Irish.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up and welcome in. This is Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast, and today is Friday, February 16th. So thank you for getting your Friday started right here by making this your first listen of the day. I'm Tyler Wojciak, and I'm the host. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And if you're watching along on YouTube, please like the video below and subscribe to the channel. Or if you're listening to the podcast, please take a brief moment to rate the show 5 stars, leave a review if you like what you hear, and subscribe there as well. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. New customers join today, and you'll get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet of $5 or more wins. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. Really excited about today's show. The Friday mailbag is back after a couple weeks off, and you guys sent some good questions as always, so I appreciate that. Plus, I posed a question on Twitter and Instagram on Wednesday to hear what you guys thought about the Shamrock series, and maybe more specifically, where do you want to see the Irish play next? I got some good reactions, and this was inspired by the official announcement that the Irish will play Army at Yankee Stadium this season in the return of the Shamrock series. I actually covered that in yesterday's episode, so if you haven't listened to that, go check it out once you're done here. Since we're on the topic, I also explained how Marcus Freeman has elevated quarterback recruiting to an elite level, and when we're going to start seeing the payoff from that on Saturdays and Wednesday's episode. On Tuesday, I reacted to Chris O'Leary's decision to leave his post as the safeties coach at Notre Dame to join the Los Angeles Chargers, and I went in depth on the commitments of Owen Strabig and Elijah Burris. So plenty of great stuff coming your way this week, but as for today, it's time to get to the questions. And our first one here is about recruiting. It comes from @JoeBro524. Who's the most important uncommitted recruit in the class of 2025? There's different ways to approach this. Most important, I would say, has to be at a position of need and has to be a really good player, obviously. But sometimes, and I feel like this is just the way it is in modern college football, considering so many guys are going to leave anyway, you just need to prioritize the best players in the class that you have a real shot of getting. So after thinking about those two things, I think the most important uncommitted prospect is 4-star edge rusher Damian Shanklin. There's a bunch of different reasons why. First of all, he's an awesome player, and he plays a position of need. He's an edge rusher. He could play Viper, could potentially play outside linebacker at Notre Dame, and he is very, very good. Notre Dame is not typically able to land prospects of his caliber, especially at this position. So it would be huge for Notre Dame to land him, not to mention the fact that they just lost a commitment from 4-star edge rusher CJ May. I think Damian Shanklin is better. I would prefer to have both, but if I were to pick one, I would take Shanklin, and it seems like Notre Dame is in good position with him. There's also the fact that he's from Indianapolis. He plays at Warren Central High School, just down 31 in Indiana, and it's very rare for players of this caliber to be from the state of Indiana. So when you add all of that together, I really think Damian Shanklin is the most important uncommitted recruit in the class of 2025. But there are some other options that I want to hit on here. 4-star wide receiver Derek Meadows. He plays a position of need. Obviously, Notre Dame has been lacking at wide receiver for a long time, and getting a guy like Derek Meadows would certainly help in getting that position back to where it needs to be if Notre Dame wants to compete with the elites of college football. Meadows is a physical specimen. He's 6'5", 200 pounds. He plays for Bishop Gorman, which is one of the best, if not the best, high school programs in the entire country. It's not really even a high school. It's like a prep school for athletes, but he's a really, really good player. Notre Dame has been on him early. Then he exploded at a 7-on-7 camp recently, and now everyone in the country wants a piece of him. So if Notre Dame were able to land him, that would be a big, big win for the recruiting department. Also got to throw in 4-star athlete Dallas Golden. Notre Dame wants him at cornerback, but it doesn't really matter where he plays because Dallas Golden is an elite football player. He's one of the best prospects to make his way to South Bend for Junior Day. It seems like Notre Dame is in really good position to land him, but they need to because he is just that good. He's going to be great wherever he goes. He's also from Berkeley Prep, which is in Florida, which is also where Keon Keeley is from, which I realize is a sore subject, but Notre Dame needs to get really talented players from Florida. They missed on Keeley, but they have a really good chance with Dallas Golden, so he's in there as well. Lastly, I would say 4-star safety Jaden Blair, really, really good player out of North Carolina. Notre Dame needs safeties. They need some really talented prospects at that position. I think Jaden Blair is really good. He's built kind of like a young Kyle Hamilton. He's 6'4", 190 pounds. Could play early if he ends up at Notre Dame. I do think that the departure of Chris O'Leary kind of complicates that recruitment a little bit. Notre Dame has some ground to make up, but if they do that and they're able to land Jaden Blair, this could end up being one of the best defensive back classes Notre Dame has ever had, certainly in my lifetime, if they're able to land guys like Dallas Golden and Jaden Blair. So those are my 4, but number 1 is Damian Shanklin. All right, kind of went long in that one. Let's move on to this next one from @DrewBrennan77. Another recruiting question. As Notre Dame continues to recruit running backs in the class of 2025, and with 2 running backs already committed, do you get the sense they are looking to over-recruit one of them and have them drop off? The simple answer is yes, because right now, Notre Dame does have 2 running back commitments in the class, and they have been committed for a long time. So they've got 4-star Justin Thurman. He's the number 24 running back, according to the 24/7 Sports Composite. He committed to Notre Dame on August 1st of 2023. They also have a commitment from 3-star Daniel Anderson. He's the number 39th ranked running back in the class. He committed to Notre Dame on September 23rd, 2023. Notre Dame was able to secure their running back class in 2024 very early when they were able to get commitments from Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams. So they had a head start on the class of 2025. Dylan McCullough and the rest of the offensive staff got to work early, so they were able to land these commitments pretty early on in the process. It looks like they were wrapped up because Notre Dame doesn't need more than 2 running backs in this class. As a matter of fact, I don't think they will take 3. I think if they get another commitment, that one of these guys is probably going to decommit. So when Notre Dame got these 2 commitments as early as they did, I was pretty surprised because I felt like, hey, you just had this really good haul with Young and Williams. You've got some more time. Be aggressive. Shoot for the stars. Go for some of the top running backs in the class, the guys that Notre Dame doesn't normally get. You have all this time. Why not really put in the work to get those guys? Notre Dame went in a different route. They ended up getting these commitments from Thurman and Anderson early. And if Dylan McCullough really likes him and he thinks that they can be great players and maybe Daniel Anderson is more of like a diamond in the rough, then okay, then maybe they're willing to sit this one out. But the fact that they're continuing to recruit running backs, and this has been more of a recent thing, that tells me about how the coaching staff views one of these 2 guys in Thurman and Anderson. Right now, Notre Dame is pushing hard for James Simon out of Louisiana. He's the number 20 running back in this class. Everyone thinks he's going to Louisiana because Simon is from Louisiana, and more often than not, the best prospects in Louisiana typically stay home or close to home and end up at LSU. So Notre Dame probably won't land Simon. I think there's a bunch of crystal balls that project him to end up with the LSU Tigers, but I still think the fact that Notre Dame is pursuing him, even though they have 2 other running back commitments in this class, is pretty telling. It seems to me that they are still in the market for a top-end running back, and if they were able to land one of those guys at the top of the board, one of the current commitments is probably going to go, and my guess would be Daniel Anderson, just given the fact that he is not rated as high as Thurman. I also just think Justin Thurman is a better player. It would make more sense for Anderson to leave than Thurman. All right. Next up, @VoluntaryJoel41. Is it a net positive that Notre Dame has stylistically similar quarterbacks in Riley Leonard, Steve Angeli, and Kenny Minchey that are athletic enough to cover for an inexperienced offensive line? I would say yes, absolutely, for multiple reasons. One, it's nice to have guys who can move around in case that guys on the defense get through. You mentioned Notre Dame has an inexperienced offensive line. I do think the offensive line is going to struggle, especially early on. Hopefully they're able to figure it out as the season goes along. But yeah, I imagine that early on the quarterbacks are going to have to be a little mobile, move around, avoid some sacks, make some plays with their legs. And the fact that all 3 of their quarterbacks can move around is a very good thing. I also just think that you need a dual threat quarterback in college football these days, or really at any level. Like, you don't see many statues at quarterbacks in the NFL either. Maybe in high school you can get away with it if you have a quarterback that can just pick guys apart. But having a guy who's a threat in the running game is so huge. But most importantly, you just need to be able to move around in the pocket, avoid sacks, extend the play, make a throw on the run. You just need that now. Their guys on defense are too good, need to be able to escape. And having a guy like Riley Leonard and even Steve Angeli, who made some plays with his legs in the Sun Bowl, it just adds a whole other element to the offense. Notre Dame likes to run the ball. They want to be a ground and pound offensive and defensive line driven program. And when your quarterback is a threat in the run game, it makes your offense that much more dynamic. And we saw that with LSU the past couple of seasons with Jane Daniels and Mike Denbrock running the show there as the offensive coordinator. He figured out a way to maximize Jane Daniels' potential with his arm and his legs. Now, I don't know if any of these quarterbacks at Notre Dame have anywhere near the running ability that Jane Daniels has. He's like once in a generation, but still, Riley Leonard can definitely move around, and Jelly and Minchie, they can all be factors. I would say Leonard the most, Angeli second, and Minchie third. But having that as an option, being able to run the read option is huge. It forces the defensive line to stay honest and be on the lookout for that, which then creates a numbers advantage in the running game. So it's huge, absolutely a net positive. And yeah, and it can definitely help the fact that Notre Dame's offensive line might struggle a little bit early on. All right, we got a lot more questions left to get to, but first, a word from our sponsors. Get buckets with your first bet on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 if your bet wins. Bet on all your favorite NBA players and teams with quick bets, live same-game parlays, exclusive props, and more. Just visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and shoot your shot. FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NBA. Okay, our next question comes from @BVG should be coach 2948. That is an unbelievable handle. That is so funny, and I hope you're kidding, but it's very good. BVG should be coach 2948 wants to know, if Michigan got in last year with their schedule and only a 4-team playoff, why shouldn't ND this year with a 12-team? So this was in response to my episode yesterday where I discussed whether or not a weak schedule could impact Notre Dame's ability to make the playoffs. So even though BVG should be coach probably thinks I'm an idiot based on the tone of this comment, let me explain. I was not saying that Notre Dame could go undefeated and not make it. My point was that if Notre Dame ends up losing 2 games this season, they are going to be less likely to make the college football playoff than they would in most other seasons if they were to go 10-2 because of the schedule. Like, I think if Notre Dame had finished 10-2 last season, if they had just defeated Clemson or defeated Louisville or defeated Ohio State, if they had won any one of those games, they probably would make the playoff in a 12-team format. They obviously wouldn't have made it in the 4-team format, but you get my point. If Notre Dame goes 10-2, more often than not, they're going to make the playoff. But the schedule next year, at least as it looks right now, is pretty weak. There aren't a ton of marquee games. I think Louisville could be good. Florida State could be good. USC potentially. You never really know. I mean, I feel like they're going to be better than they were last year, but are they going to be a top 15? It's really just hard to say because their defense has so much ground to make up. The quarterback is a question mark, even though he looked good in the Holiday Bowl. So I don't really know. I think that if this were a 4-team playoff and Notre Dame were to have this same schedule, they'd probably have to go undefeated. I mean, unless some of these schools on the schedule end up being a lot better than we expect they will be. Maybe Texas A&M could be one of those schools, even though it's Mike Elko's first season as head coach there. I just feel like they lost so many guys after Jimbo left, and I'm not saying they all left because Jimbo got fired, but I just think there's been so much roster turnover there in College Station that it's going to be really hard for them to be competing at the top of the SEC, let alone in the country. So, yeah, I think the schedule is definitely going to play a factor into whether or not they make the playoff. I think they have a little less wiggle room. If they go 12-0, they're fine. They're going to host a playoff game. If they go 11-1, they're going to host a playoff game. But as soon as they get 10-2, it's not that they're eliminated from the college football playoff. They're just probably going to need some other things to happen more so than in any other year. But maybe I could be completely wrong on this. The schedule could end up being a lot more difficult than what we think it will be today here as we sit here in the middle of February. Okay. Next one, @RyanFire92. Does the Notre Dame men's basketball team need to fire their recruiting coach? They're having serious issues finding talent and good team chemistry. Ryan, I understand you might be more inclined to fire people because it's in your name. You're literally @RyanFire92, but I don't think that's the case here. I don't think anyone on Micah Shrewsbury's staff should be fired after his first season as head coach of the Notre Dame men's basketball program. Yes, this team has struggled mightily throughout most of the year, although they have won back-to-back games. First time that's happened in 2 years. Back-to-back conference games. You get my point there. But any team forced to play this many freshmen in modern college basketball is likely going to struggle. College basketball is becoming an old man's game. especially at the top with the transfer portal. The best teams in college basketball are typically pretty old, and you get guys who have a lot of experience playing elsewhere. You get them in the portal. You build an experienced veteran team. You're not seeing as many teams filled with one-and-done guys dominating college basketball. Look at Kentucky. They had an unbelievable recruiting class last year. They have a bunch of really good future NBA guys like Rob Dillingham and DJ Wagner on their team. And it kind of resembles like the early Calipari Kentucky teams where they had a bunch of freshmen playing, but those teams all went to the Final Four. This Kentucky team lost 3 straight at home for the first time in a really long time. Like the game is different now, so playing freshmen really it's not always conducive to success, especially when you're at a place like Notre Dame where it's a lot harder to recruit those 5 stars every single year in men's basketball. So Notre Dame currently has 3 commits in the class of 2026, which ranks 26th in the country. I'm really excited about the potential of small forward Sir Muhammad. He's the best prospect in the class. He's a top 50 player. He could be really, really good for the Irish very early on in his career. So I understand this team has not always been the most fun to watch. That makes some mistakes sometimes. You're like, what are you thinking? But then you remember that all of these guys are like 18 years old, getting their first real experience playing college basketball. And it has been an uphill battle, but I think that later on, the team and the program will benefit from these growing pains that they're experiencing this year. All right, next up comes from @Nathan_Coleman45. What are your top 5 favorite Shamrock Series uniforms? So I'm going to be honest, this was a lot harder to find 5 that I really liked because I haven't been a huge fan of several of the Shamrock Series uniforms, and it hasn't even really been around that long. I think the first game was back in 2009 against Washington State. So at 5, I've got Notre Dame Purdue. This was from 2014. I don't even really love this one. There's a lot of Navy. This was the game that was played in Lucas Oil Stadium. I was at that game. It was pretty fun, probably a little bit closer than it needed to be. I'm not really going to go that in depth on it just because I needed to pick a 5th. So at 4th, I've got Notre Dame versus Army in 2010. This is kind of cheating because it's not really a uniform specific to the Shamrock Series like Notre Dame has been doing throughout much of the series. This was when Notre Dame was still an Adidas school. It was Brian Kelly's first year. This is the first time they played at Yankee Stadium, or the new Yankee Stadium, I should say. And that was when they wore like sort of the old school green jerseys that were dark green, gold numbers. It's basically the same uniforms that they wore against USC in 2005. I really like that color green, the Kelly green. I like that a lot more than the green that Under Armour has been using, the more neon look. I'm just not a fan, and I really wish they changed the shade. I guess they did it a little bit different this year for the Ohio State game, but still, it was a little too bright for my liking, but it was still better than the other greens they had used in years past. Okay. At number 3, I'm kind of cheating here. I'm doing the Notre Dame Navy Aer Lingus uniforms because even though that wasn't technically a Shamrock Series game, I think it would have been if Aer Lingus didn't hold the sponsorship rights to that event. I just really liked the little the trim on the shoulders for Notre Dame's uniforms in that game, and I just love the Navy uniforms with the gold helmets. They didn't really do a lot there, but I thought the wrinkle that they did add was cool. And then at number 2, I've got Notre Dame BYU in 2022. I really loved the white and gold and the fact that they didn't mess with the helmets. The jerseys still kind of resembled like the white Notre Dame men's basketball uniform, so it wasn't like super creative, but I just think like the white on gold with the gold helmet shining in a dome like that looked really, really good. And that leads me to my first pick, which is 2013 Notre Dame versus Arizona State. All white again, slightly different though because those uniforms had the green trim. I think they had like green socks, green cleats, but they had the all-white uniforms and the all-white pants. And I even liked the helmets where they had the shamrock on it, but it was like sort of shiny. Most of the other stuff that they did with the helmets, I've absolutely hated, and it's because Notre Dame already has the best helmets in college football, or maybe even all of football, right, with just the plain gold. So whenever they mess with it, I normally don't like it, but this time with the shamrock, I was like, okay, I dig that. It was a lot better than when Notre Dame played Maryland. I believe it was 2011. They tried to do something where, like, I don't even know how to describe that gold helmet. It was like almost like spotty, and they had the green shamrock on it. Was not a huge fan of that one, but I really have been a fan of the all whites that they've done in the Shamrock series. Not so much a fan of the all whites that they wore in Clemson, because that was just an absolute zero of a performance by the Fighting Irish in that one. So hopefully they don't go back to that anytime soon. But speaking of the Shamrock series, it is time to hear where you want to see Notre Dame play in the next iteration of the game. That's coming up right after this. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Gametime is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. With great deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for all of the fun you're going to have. I recently used Gametime to go to a Lakers game. Day of, was thinking, wow, should we go to a Lakers game tonight? They're only playing the Trailblazers. Tickets could be pretty cheap. Looked at Gametime. Yup, they were cheap. We bought them. We went. We got to watch LeBron play for very little money, and it was a great experience. It is the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect once you arrive. Plus, you can buy tickets in a matter of seconds, just 2 taps and you're set, and the tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, so as I mentioned at the top of the show, this week I threw out a question to you guys here, what you guys thought about where should Notre Dame play the next open Shamrock Series game. So in 2024, they're going to be playing Army at Yankee Stadium, and then in 2026, they will be playing Wisconsin at Lambeau Field to open the season. That game was originally scheduled in 2020. It got rescheduled, obviously, because of the pandemic. So I am really, really excited for that game a couple years from now. But my choice for this, I'm being a little selfish here, but I do think that this would be awesome. If Notre Dame played at SoFi Stadium, that would be so cool. I've been to 2 games at SoFi. By far, just the coolest, most unique stadium atmosphere I've ever seen. I'll admit, because it's a pro stadium, it is pretty corporate, but the fact that it's got like the indoor-outdoor thing going is really, really cool. And the fact that it's only like a 20-minute drive from my house also helps, I will say. So I'm definitely hoping that one day Notre Dame heads to SoFi. I don't know who they would play. I guess maybe BYU again if they're willing to bounce around. I guess Notre Dame could play UCLA, even though that's obviously close to UCLA. Trust me, if the game is played in LA and it's Notre Dame versus UCLA, Notre Dame will still have a lot of fans. UCLA can't even sell out the Rose Bowl, which is like one of the most iconic venues ever in all of sports, and that's their home field, and they can't sell that one out. So I would not be worried about like a distinctive home field advantage for UCLA, even though it's like basically right in their backyard. I also think it'd be cool if Notre Dame played at Wrigley Field. I know that the dynamic of the stadium, the dimensions aren't necessarily ideal for a football game. Now, they have played a few of them. Now, the problem is like the end zone basically runs up right to the stands, so they'd probably have to figure that out, but given how many Notre Dame fans live in Chicago, I think it'd be perfect and it'd be pretty cool. Wrigleyville is awesome. Wrigley Field is awesome as well, so that could be an option. And then third, I've got the Rose Bowl. Notre Dame was basically robbed of playing in the real Rose Bowl after the 2020 season because of the pandemic, and the Rose Bowl wouldn't allow that game to happen there, so then they played the Rose Bowl in AT&T Stadium in Dallas. So I would love to see Notre Dame play there in one of the most iconic venues in all of sports. Again, not really sure who the opponent would be in any of this stuff, but it seems like Navy is down to play wherever, whenever. So if Notre Dame has to play the Navy game every single year, they might as well do it at a cool venue. I think any of these 3 would be awesome for the team and the fan base. All right, now let's hear what you guys thought. Voluntary Joel 41 says, I'm all in on Shamrock Series being international. Notre Dame versus Boston College in Rome. I love this idea. I think we actually talked about this last year when Notre Dame was playing Navy in Dublin. We were talking about where else could Notre Dame play internationally. I think everyone is in on Rome. That would be very, very cool. Boston College is also a good opponent for this. You got the rivalry between the 2 schools. If Boston College is willing to go out to Rome, that'd be great. I don't know where they would play in Rome, but I'm sure that there are venues out there that would make it work. So I'm in. Voluntary Joel 41. If Notre Dame ever plays in Rome, I'll give you the credit for your submission here. All right, next one. At Tasmanian Devil, great name, by the way. He wants to see the Shamrock Series played against Michigan State in Ford Field. Tasmanian Devil, I really hope that you're from Detroit. Otherwise, I don't know if this one really moves the needle for me. Now, if you're in Detroit and you want to stay close to home to watch the Irish, totally understand. I would like to see Michigan State back on the schedule. I enjoy that rivalry. That's a lot more fun than playing Wake Forest every year, right? Like there is at least some history with Notre Dame and Michigan State, and I think the Spartans will be on the rise here with Jonathan Smith as the new head coach. But Ford Field, NFL stadiums, I don't know. They're just, I know I said SoFi Stadium, but that's a unique place. Ford Field, I don't know. You've been into one domed NFL stadium. You've probably been to them all. Outside of like AT&T Stadium in Dallas, that one is still very, very cool. Speaking of pro domes, though, Tom Rentschler says Lucas Oil Stadium in Indianapolis. Tom, we've been there. We've done that. I just said in the second segment that we were at that game. Now, if you're from Indianapolis, again, I get it. You want to stay close to home. I personally think Indianapolis is very underrated. I've had to go there several times for work and the Big Ten headquarters, all that. The Big Ten headquarters aren't there, but they play the Big Ten championship there. So been to Indy a lot lately. Lots of good food, certainly nearby Lucas Oil, but I think we can be a little bit more creative with these. Okay, Jackson Johnson says Lambeau Field. I've got good news for you, Jackson. They're playing there against Wisconsin, as I just said earlier, in 2026 to open the season. I really cannot wait for that game. I was really hoping to go to that game in 2020. And if you think about it, man, that 2020 schedule had the chance to be something like really special. They were going to open the season in Ireland against Navy. We saw how fun that game was this past year. And then you had the Lambeau Field game against Wisconsin, plus Clemson at home, and that Notre Dame team was so awesome. Yes, that 2020 season was great. The fact that they were able to go undefeated during the pandemic, it was like the only source of joy I had in my entire life that year. But if Notre Dame could have just played a regular season with full fans in the stands and they got to go to all these iconic venues, it would have been even better than what it was, and it already was such an incredible season. I think that's a good note to end it on, right? Let's end on a high note. That is going to do it for this episode, and that's another week of Locked On Irish in the books. Thanks again for making this your first listen of the day. I'm going to be back on Monday of next week. I know I haven't had a Monday episode in a while. I'll be back on Monday of next week to talk with recruiting insider Brian Smith. We're going to go deep into this class of 2025 and how it might end up being the best recruiting class Notre Dame has had in a decade plus. So you're going to want to tune in for that. In the meantime, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the pod, and follow the show on X at Locked On Irish, on Instagram at Locked On Irish Pod, and my personal X account at Tyler, WOJCIAK. Have a great weekend, everybody. I'll see you Monday.